jumping out of commodities, I was super excited about fast-growing technologies. Commodities is an old business. You're working within this old wheel. However, I was super excited about creating my own wheel, creating something that didn't exist and really pushing something forward and being passionate about it. So I found a group of crazy Russian scientists who had convinced me about this new upcoming technology that's going to change the world for good, and it's called augmented reality.
The startup investment landscape is changing, and world-class companies are being built outside of Silicon Valley. We find them, talk with them, and discuss the upside of investing in them. Welcome to Upside. Woo!
Hello, and welcome to the Upside Podcast, the first podcast finding upside outside of Silicon Valley. I'm Eric Hornung, and I'm accompanied by my co-host, Mr. Not Going to Coachella himself, Jay Klaus. Jay, how's it going, man?
Giving me a nickname so you can instead actually deflect and talk about the cool thing that you're doing.
That's exactly why I gave you that nickname.
Yeah, well, I wish you well on your trip to Coachella. What is it, a bachelor party?
It's a bachelor party. Me and you tried to get a media pass to Coachella. They kindly turned us down.
That was the most curt email I've ever seen.
This is not for you. Okay. All right.
For the listeners, we had the good fortune of being media partners with CES, as you probably know, in January. And so we thought, that was cool. What if we proactively tried to be media partners with more events that we wanted to go to? And Eric, already planning to go to Coachella, had us apply to be media partners for Coachella, where we could have done some really great and interesting interviews, I'm sure. And they responded several months later with, I believe it was literally a one-line email saying, sorry, no thanks.
Yeah, it wasn't long and drawn out, and we're excited about your application next year or anything like that. It was just, I don't think so. Not going to fly here.
Have you gone to music festivals before?
I have been to Spring Awakening in Chicago when I was living in Chicago. Other than that, no real music festivals. No, hasn't really been my scene. Have you?
You didn't go to Lala when you were in Chicago?
I did not, actually. No.
Wow. I have only been to Bonnaroo. I did go to Fashion Meets Music Festival, which is a failure of a music festival here in Columbus, Ohio. But Bonnaroo was a lot of fun, and I've been meaning to go to Coachella. I've sold a lot of music festival tickets in my life with the former company Tixers, but no, Bonnaroo was my only experience, and that was intense. I mean, it is hot.
I think the reason I haven't done many music festivals is because I think I've always wanted to do the camping experience. Like, I think Bonnaroo would be like up my alley versus like the Spring Awakening, where you woke up in the morning and went to a venue and then left at 11 o'clock at night and then went to like an after concert or something like that. Just not really my speed. It didn't really feel like a community. It felt like more of a, hey, I'm going to a show and there's a lot of shows in a row, but it's not like I feel you get more of a community vibe at a camping event. So we are actually doing an RV at Coachella, so I'm hoping that we get that kind of camping cachet.
That'd be cool. Yeah, Bonnaroo, real music fans, because it is not for the faint of heart. I mean, you have to get into a line to get your vehicle into this place. You drive several hours. There's no coming and going. You are camping for 4 days, and it is hot, and it is usually dry. It would actually probably be more miserable if it wasn't dry. If I had to live in the rain in that farm for 4 days, that would have been a mess. But I hope you have a lot of fun, and I hope that this year's Coachella has the return of the Tupac hologram.
Well, here's the thing. We're recording this intro before Coachella. We'll probably record the outro after Coachella. So we'll know by the end of this interview, we'll have taken a trip through time. And we can tell you that if there was a hologram at Coachella this year.
Wow. Speaking of Tupac tripping through time to be at Coachella in 2012, our guest today is Janosch Amstutz, the founder of HoloMe technology. HoloMe creates life-sized, high-definition, real humans in augmented reality. They've created a simple software tool that allows brands and companies to easily put real people into augmented reality in a scalable way. Obviously, I brought up the Tupac hologram because it feels a little bit like this. This is some real cutting-edge stuff here, Eric.
It is. And I think I already want a J hologram just to be walking around my house, just to really confuse Hank.
as soon as holograms are affordable to the layman, I'm going to J-hologram all over the place.
J-logram. All over the place?
Wow.
Is that really the phrase you wanted to use?
Yeah, everywhere. A J-hologram for every household. It's going to be my platform.
A J in every house. There you go. It would make running a campaign a lot easier.
Totally. HoloMe was founded in 2017. They're based in London, and they've raised about $1 million in funding to this point from the London Co-Investment Fund. Should be a new conversation for us here on the podcast. Looking forward to talk to Janosch here in a second. If you guys have thoughts as we go throughout this episode, please tweet at us at UpsideFM or email us hello@upside.fm, and we'll get into that interview with Jan right after this. But before we do that, let's bring in Rob McDonald, a partner at Taft, Stettinius, and Hollister, to teach us about private placements and fundraising. Taft, Stettinius, and Hollister is a law firm known for assisting entrepreneurs across the heartland. And as a reminder, the following remarks by Taft attorneys are for informational purposes only and are not legal advice. This information is not intended to create, and receipt of it does not constitute an attorney-client relationship. No person or organization should act upon this information without first seeking professional counsel. Rob, welcome back to the show. How are things in Cincinnati?
Great, Jay. Thanks again for having me.
One of the topic areas we get the most questions about, or there's the most confusion about, has to be regulation in the venture capital and private placement space. What guidelines can you provide early stage founders to ensure they are not violating any securities regulations?
It is really important for early stage founders to do their homework, have a basic understanding of securities regulations, the exemptions that exist, and the exemption that the company intends to rely on. For most early stage companies, the securities regs will provide an easy and cheap framework for them to stay within, but this should not be left to chance. Founders should read and discuss with their lawyer what exemption they're going to rely on.
Awesome. And if people want to learn more about Taft or yourself, where should they go?
The best place to go would be www.taftlaw.com or my Twitter at RWM.
Jan, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for hosting me.
Of course, great to have you here. And you're on our shores, so that's nice. Look at that, in America. Yeah, and we like to start on Upside with a background of the founder. So can you tell us about the history of Jan?
Sure. So I'm Swiss. However, I grew up in Australia. My parents were big hippies, and Switzerland wasn't really the place for them to be back in the 80s. And Chernobyl happened, which was the nuclear power plant disaster in Ukraine, and that affected most of Europe. They weren't particularly affected by it, but they found it a good excuse to leave their family and travel as far away as possible. So yeah, we grew up in a forest in Australia, in a small town called Byron Bay, which is well known for its surfing, coffee, and hippie lifestyle. And my upbringing was very alternative. We had solar power, rainwater, and my parents didn't send me to school with shoes until I was 7 years old. So we went on our first field trip. And apparently, if you're going on a field trip to the city, you need shoes. So that's where I basically started my life. It was very different to kind of the norm.
Australia is one of the areas of the planet that I always forget exists. And every time I hear it, I'm like, that is a place I want to go. Can you tell me more about what Australia is like?
Australia is a really beautiful place. But as you said, sometimes people forget it does exist because it's so far removed from the rest of the world. However, the kind of the lifestyle where I grew up in Australia is kind of comparable to maybe San Francisco, but very small scale.
What's the business community like? For strange reference, Australia, I think, is the 4th or 5th most listened to country for our podcast. And I have no idea what the startup world in Australia is like. Do you have any insight?
Well, I mean, I left Australia probably about 12 years ago. But growing up, we've always had this mentality in Australia of innovating and creating new things. You know, for example, the dual flush toilet came from Australia from a necessity of water restrictions in the summer. You know, the lawnmower, things like that. So I think Australians have always been very innovative, and they're also relatively laid back. So listening to podcasts all the time is probably a great pastime for them to have.
Do you feel a stronger connection to your Swiss heritage or your Australian upbringing?
That's a question I get a lot, actually. And it's a really difficult one for me to process. So when I go to Australia, I am treated as kind of the other, a bit of a foreigner. I have a bit of a different mentality to the general Australians. and that acceptance sometimes isn't there. And likewise, when I go to Switzerland, my accent isn't perfect in Switzerland, so I get questioned as to where am I really from. So it's always a difficult one, and I feel that, you know, if I go to cities like New York or London, or for example, at the moment I live in London, and there I feel more accepted just because there's a general kind of multicultural attitude. So yeah, it's a really difficult one. I'd like to say that I've got kind of the best mentality of both worlds rather than the worst.
How aware were you growing up that not wearing shoes to school was not normal before that field trip?
Yeah, so I was kind of living in a bubble. You could call it that. You know, we had a micro farm with chickens and a cow for milk, some donkeys that were mostly annoying because, you know, what donkeys are good at is just kind of wailing rather than anything else. So, you know, with that kind of mindset as a kid, you know, climbing trees was my video games, and going to school without shoes was just, you know, if my parents didn't give me shoes, then they didn't give me shoes.
Did you guys not have TV at all?
So we did, you know, living on solar power back in the early 90s, we had 12 volts of power instead of your normal, I think in the US it's 110, right? So we had a TV, it was a black and white TV, around about the size of, you know, a small novel, a small book. And it took me a few years to find out that the Simpsons were actually yellow when I went to a friend's place who had, you know, normal power. So that was a really interesting kind of revelation for me.
That's crazy. So it wasn't, man, did you just think that it was a completely black and white show?
Well, you know, once again, black and white was the norm. So, you know, we knew color TV existed. We knew color TV existed, but, you know, we were just used to this format, this medium of communication, which for us, you know, it was the cutting edge, right?
What's a question no one asks you about your upbringing that they should?
That's a really difficult one. I haven't actually thought of what someone would ask. I think a good question is like the food. So my upbringing was particularly interesting because my father would love to give me junk food because he wanted me to be like any other kid. So I'd get, you know, your fruit roll-ups and your chocolate ice cream for dessert. And my mother was the complete opposite. So I lived this dual lifestyle of cuisine. So my mother would be giving me carob instead of chocolate, and my father would give me chocolate ice cream straight afterwards. So
which one did you prefer?
I preferred both.
Not your mom or your dad. Sorry, the foods.
yeah. I mean, both cuisines. So it's always exciting getting kind of a wide mix of foods, and, you know, even to this day, you know, I would, you know, enjoy a ripe mango just as much as, you know, having mango ice cream. So
you said 12 years ago you left Australia. What age were you when you left?
So I was 18 when I left Australia. So even though my upbringing was, you know, alternative and different and creative, for my parents it was quite a challenge, because if you're living, you know, in the middle of nowhere in a forest, you know, the career choices aren't that broad. So even though we lived up extremely happy and content, we were relatively poor. And for me, that was always on my mind, you know, growing up, is, you know, I would prefer to be independent and stand on my own feet as soon as possible rather than being a burden on my family. So the first chance I got, I moved back to Switzerland to pursue a career in you know, what my parents would call the biggest rebellion ever. I pursued a career in physical commodities trading. So I went in to move vast amounts of rocks around the world, destroying the environment, you know, creating these goods that you know, my parents would have thought unnecessary.
How did you know you were poor if you lived in a bubble?
Kind of the comparison to other kids, and, you know, when you go and visit your family, you know, we had one day a year where we could go clothes shopping, and we had, you know, there was always like a kind of the set budget, and that was, you know, your clothes for the year. And growing up, changing sizes, you know, would have like 3 t-shirts or whatever. So yeah, you know, obviously the awareness was there. The moment we hit high school, that our upbringing was a bit different to the rest of the people.
How did physical commodities trading even enter your world as something you could do?
That's a good question. So my mentality to life has always been set myself challenges and achieve them at whatever cost. And when I moved back to Switzerland, the town where I was born had transformed into this commodities business haven. Switzerland is well known for it's business culture, business and banking. So when I moved there, I saw all these kind of young guys who were these commodities hotshots earning ridiculous figures. And for me, that was a great challenge for myself to set. Hey, if I want to become independent, I may as well shoot for the best job in town. And that's how it all started.
How'd you get in the door?
I actually had a business card handed to me over the bar when I was in a bar, basically saying, this is an opportunity that you don't want to miss. You might be able to do it, you might not. Take the meeting, see how it goes. And for me, first I had to Google what the company was, figure out what's being asked of me, buy my first business shirt, and rock up to that meeting and just exude my confidence.
And you were like 18 at this time.
Yeah, I just turned 19 then. Apparently they'd been looking for someone with a degree. However, they couldn't find someone to work within this team. And I just took a chance and convinced them to take me on. And if they didn't like me, then they could fire me.
What were some of the downsides of that job?
Commodities is great. I mean, you're earning good money, you're traveling the world. I was in the team that was deployed whenever there was issues. So, I was being sent out to Russia, to Ukraine, to all parts of Europe, even into Asia. And, you're really moving forward in kind of your career prospects extremely fast. And what you're trading off in that instance is you're trading off kind of doing what you want. You're growing career-wise, but not as a person. And you're putting a lot of hours behind it. Commodities is a standard 70, 80-hour week. And for me as a young guy, that was fantastic. I was this young, independent man, could buy anything I want, go on holiday, to the most expensive resorts, fly home for Christmas every year, which is also not super cheap if you're flying halfway across the world. But you're really trading off that ability to grow as a person, I think.
What was it like going home for a holiday after you had kind of joined this lucrative profession where it's clear that you're making a lot of money and you're going back home, I think, to like the farm?
It was interesting. For me, everything was moving so fast in a career like that. So for me, going home, it's a 24-hour flight, and my average visit home would be about 6 or 7 days. So when you're there, you're jet lagged, and you just want to kind of tick the boxes and kind of spend as much time with your family as possible. And then before you know it, you're back in the mix of things in Europe. So that was kind of the one major learning curve for me as a young guy, was that maybe not everything is about your career.
How did you start to define what you want? You said that as you're traveling around, you're growing your career, but not personally, and you started to learn what you want. How do you define what you want now?
So for me, that was a family, you call it a family crisis, family emergency. My mother was diagnosed with cancer about 5 years into me living in Europe. And for me, that really kind of shook the foundations of my lifestyle. I had the mentality of, I'm building my career now, but there'll always be time later. There'll be time for my family. There'll be time for me to grow into things that I want to do. And within 3 months of my mother's diagnosis, she passed away. And that was kind of a massive wake-up call for me. How can you wait for something that doesn't exist anymore? And my mother also told me, the same thing, that if you want to do something, don't wait. If you want to become a certain type of person, don't wait until it's too late. Just do it. So that was kind of the big pivot point in my career and my mentality towards life.
I'm going to take us forward a little bit. So you're in Switzerland, you're doing commodities trading. You're in London now. What happened in the meantime?
So after I had decided that, I should actually do what I want to do in life, and I started to question, well, how can I become the best possible person that I want to be? That starts with the career, I think. If you're not happy with your career, that flows into other parts of life. So I determined that the best way to become the best possible person I want to be would be to model a career around myself. And the easiest way to do that is to found your own company. Jumping out of commodities, I was super excited about fast-growing technologies. Commodities is an old business. You're working within this old wheel. However, I was super excited about creating my own wheel, creating something that didn't exist and really pushing something forward and being passionate about it. So I found a group of crazy Russian scientists who had convinced me about this new upcoming technology that's going to change the world for good. And it's called augmented reality. And I got absolutely hooked on this new concept of this new medium, this new computing platform. How we consume technology will change forever. And this was in the early days of AR. This was back in 2014, where there was these grand visions being sold. And that really got me hooked. And that was my way to transition my commodities career into something that I was super excited about.
You don't just find crazy Russian scientists. Like, what do you mean you found some crazy Russian scientists?
Well, as all good Russian scientists do, they find you. And I was interested in moving careers. I was interested in micro investing in technologies. So moving my monthly paycheck, out of expendable things and into building a future. And so I decided to micro invest. And as soon as you start getting interested in micro investing in tech, all sorts of people turn up at your door saying, I know this guy, I know that guy, I know that team who's been researching this niche technology. You should check them out. Yeah, and that's how I got in touch with this group of computer engineers in Moscow.
What was the first demonstration of augmented reality that you saw that so encapsulated you?
So the first demonstration that we saw, when I got interested in the augmented reality space and talking to this research team, we decided to jointly visit the Augmented World Expo in Santa Clara in 2014, just to check out what's going on in the space. Who are the players? What are we up against here? And so we flew there together. We saw a bunch of new technologies at the time, companies like Dacry and Kazoom and Metavision, releasing all of these, crazy devices and crazy technologies. But my Russian scientists, they were unimpressed. And I kept questioning. I was like, why are you so unhappy? And they're like, oh, we've seen this 2 years ago. We can do better. And then I said, okay, well, prove it. Here's some cash. This is like the task. Prove it. Do better. And they blew me away. They absolutely blew me away. So the first applications that we were looking at were the capture of humans. So how do you capture a human as perfectly as possible and translate that into augmented and virtual reality? And that task has stuck with us for the past 4 years.
So how do you, this is a perfect segue. That really brings us into HoloMe. How do you describe HoloMe today?
HoloMe is a human capture software technology. We basically put humans into AR with high definition and extreme low data sets. You could visualize it as something like Pokemon Go, but instead of shiny little Pokemon, you've got real life humans. We have a pre-recorded tool that allows content creators to push out messages. However, we can also do this in real time as a quasi holographic Skype.
And something, you just mentioned the size of data. On a lot of your messaging, it says, in a scalable way. What does that mean in the AR sort of space?
Great. Yeah. So AR has had two fundamental barriers to entry into the market, barriers to mass success. On the one side, it's the consumer adoption. On the other side, is the content capture. How do you create an asset for AR in a scalable way? And that's what we do. So as opposed to creating, so for example, you have 3D capture methods where you're capturing a human three-dimensionally. However, you're looking at like a gigabyte of data per minute. And if you want to scale that to hundreds of thousands of assets, consumers simply can't consume that sort of tech. So what we do for the first time is we create this scalable solution, which allows you to put hundreds of thousands of assets into AR. So if you think of a retailer wants to put their garments into augmented reality. The same way as they're selling their garments currently on mobile apps, they've got a still image of the garment, they have a video, and they want a human in AR. Retailers have hundreds of thousands of assets per year, and we are able to deploy that with our tech. Whereas previously, it's been a one-off experience, it's been a gimmick. What we allow is a way to communicate to clients in a scalable, long-term solution.
How do you get me into AR without getting all like 3D of me? Am I misunderstanding this? Like, I don't understand how like I get in.
Perfect question. So what we do is we capture humans using simple video. So a simple video camera in a studio for enterprise or for consumer use. Even an iPhone camera is enough. And we cut you out of the imagery. So we just leave the human and we overlay a data mesh, which doesn't create a 3D experience. It gives the user the illusion of three-dimensionality. So it's the perception of three-dimensionality as opposed to actual 3D scanning. And this allows us to be about 100 times smaller on the data.
So it sounds like to me, it's as if I'm looking through a Photoshop magic wand or lasso. Like, you're just doing that on video in real time and pulling that human out from the background.
Correct. And then on top of that, we have a bunch of algorithms which morph the human in real time as well to destroy the billboarding effect. So basically, you can view that human in your space, and it has the appearance as if that human is actually 3D in your space.
Could you customize that? So like if we wanted to morph Jay into actually being in shape?
We could, but we don't. So the beauty of our tech is that we retain kind of the reality of capture exactly. So we capture real humans, we don't change them. And that's a fundamental importance in human capture, is that you have to make it perfect. Because if you don't make it perfect, the consumer, the user, will notice something is wrong and they will switch off to the experience. So unfortunately, we can't put you in shape.
Neither can I. Yeah, and something that happens on the show a lot here, a lot of the companies we talk to are taking existing technology and putting it into a new context. And so we talk a lot about the model. I'm a product guy. I'm really interested into digging into the black box here a little bit more, since this is such new technology. You mentioned that your Russian scientists were working on this and showing it to you as early as 2014. We're sitting here in 2019. You're describing what the product does. What were some of the stages you had to go through to get to the point today? I imagine there were some massive hurdles.
Yeah, so I think for us, it was more our perception of what a product is. So we began doing similar to what Microsoft was doing at the time, Intel, a few other startups out there, 8i, for example, and Jaunt. We started off with 3D capture. So we were doing your simple depth camera capture from all sides. Back in 2015, we managed to do that in real time, which I think at the time was a world first, until about 2 weeks later, Microsoft did it. But we hit limitations. There's a limitation if you're relying on the hardware for the quality of capture. And we hit that ceiling relatively quickly and decided that wasn't the route to market. That wasn't the right solution. And then we moved into photogrammetry, even pasting gels, reflective gels on humans to capture the bounce back. But also, we weren't hitting the commercial value of human capture. It was more like, we have a group of scientists creating these wonderful technologies, but you just know it's not going to be deployed. About 2 years ago, we had a kind of a light bulb moment that instead of creating future tech and hoping for adoption, we reverse engineered the solution. So we looked at what's the keyhole to the market. What is a consumer able to consume? What's the device that they're consuming on? And let's create the best possible solution that fits through that keyhole. And that's really how HoloMe was born.
Have you been full-time on this personally since that time, around 2014?
So for me, it was a transition. I made the naive learning experience that I think a lot of startup guys do, is that you can start building a research team, but you can't rely on computer scientists to build a company. And I learned relatively quickly that if there would be commercial value in the technology, I would have to jump on board to commercialize that. So around about the end of 2016, I realized that now's the time to make that leap, if I would ever make that leap. And I quit my job. I had 6 months termination in my previous job. I moved to London from Switzerland, founded the new company in London, and started to commercialize the product.
Why London?
So I'd already moved halfway around the world away from my family. I was considering the US, but that would be another leap of faith into a new culture, a new environment. London, in terms of technology startups, is second to none in Europe. It's my mother tongue in terms of English. And in terms of immersive technologies, London is a fantastic place to be, especially now with the whole Brexit scenario. I didn't want to say the B word on the show, but I've said it. London and the UK in general are pumping a lot of money into retaining interesting technology companies. Just as an example, I get an email or a phone call once a week from some other European country enticing us with some sort of tax breaks or free office space or funding to move to their new startup innovation hubs elsewhere. But for me, it was always a no-brainer that if I would say in Europe, it would be London.
And did you bootstrap for most of those years, this team? Were they operating kind of on their own?
I always had them on payroll, so I bootstrapped it from my own savings. I think in the initial years up until our first investment, we burned through about 350,000 US, which was primarily my cash, but also, as any good startup founder does, he asks his family and friends for cash to bridge him for a couple of months, and those months stay for a couple of years.
You said the first investment. So what happened after that 350 plus the friends and family? Was there another round of investment already?
Yeah, so we recently raised early stage cap. So at the end of last year, we raised early stage cap to move our technology out of a POC style deployment. So testing the market, validation of the technologies, to our scalable solution.
POC being proof of concept.
Correct.
And so you reverse engineered this. You saw that consumers have mobile phones. You wanted to figure out a commercial aspect to it. What is the commercial route to market with HoloMe now?
So our commercial route is a two-pronged attack of the market. On the one side, we have the enterprise software solution for pre-recorded content. So anywhere, very coldly said, anywhere where human is an asset, our technology allows that content creator to move into AR. So as broadly speaking as, a fan engagement for football, to medical training, to sign language for TV broadcasters, to marketing experiences for charities, anywhere where a human is being captured, our technology is applicable. So that's product number one, and that's really our bread and butter product. It's difficult selling to enterprise, but once you're in and the ROI is evident, then it's a fantastic product to have. The second route to market is our real-time streaming, so unidirectional and bidirectional. So either streaming a show like a fashion show or a music concert or a presidential speech, for example, or in form of a holographic Skype.
Do I have to do that on the HoloMe app? Or like if I recorded myself in some sort of live stream like Instagram Live, could I do that? Does the technology work through that way?
So we've had kind of an ongoing communication with a lot of the social media platforms. We're working on integrations there. Currently, it's through our bespoke enterprise product. We are releasing our self-service tool online for both our products within the next 6 weeks. Fingers crossed.
I see some logos on your website, and I saw some headlines that involved H&M. Can you talk about some of the commercial deployments that have happened and describe how that worked?
So the initial market that we hit, which was our beachhead in terms of entering the market with our tech, is retail. Retail's had this ongoing struggle with online versus offline, bricks and mortar becoming less relevant, and online retail struggling to compete with the giants like Amazon and Alibaba. So retail has been extremely receptive to innovation and change. And our technology has allowed them to create a new medium to sell. And the H&M project was a fantastic validation project for us, for the retail sector, to show that this tech does have value for the retail market and clients are receptive to using augmented reality to buy fashion. And that's led us to having a phenomenal response from the retail market. And we're currently deploying multiple contracts at the moment.
What's the benefit for me as someone who wants to buy something from H&M using this? Is it I get to look at a human that's my size, or I get to look at a human that is me? Like, how customized is this?
So we don't capture the user itself, since the user would have to capture themselves using our tech, and currently it's not deployable. For the retailers aren't super interested in the consumer seeing fashion on themselves, especially with women's wear. Statistics in first world countries show that the vast majority of consumers don't like their own body image. So buying fashion on themselves is counterproductive, even though you'd think it's super exciting to have that suit on yourself or that garment. So retailers still prefer your usual fashion model. So what they do is they capture the model the same way as they're capturing images or video of that model. They capture an augmented reality version.
I just want to go on record as saying I love my body image.
That's fantastic.
We're so happy for you, Jay.
So I'm still a little fuzzy on what the H&M project actually looked like.
Yeah, so H&M was looking for an innovative way to showcase fashion through mobile. So we deployed a number of their models using our tech. So they captured the models in the film studio and added them to a mobile application, which allowed users to view that garment as a life-size human, the same way as you'd view Pokemon Go. And then you can choose the garment on the human. So you're seeing that virtual human in your living room. You can see how the garment fits. So for women, you can see how the dress flows, how it hangs on the human being. And that's really important for dresses, for example. And for men, you can see how the suit flexes, how it's worn. And that's a really important buying choice or buying decision for a user or for a consumer.
Strange question here, but as you were looking at commercial applications of this, did you look at the adult industry?
Good question. So we did look at the adult industry. However, what we're interested in is building a sustainable business, which is industry agnostic. And additionally, when you're looking for venture capital money, a lot of venture capital firms aren't accepting or willing to invest in companies that have entered those sort of industries. I'm sure our technology will be used in all sectors in future, the same way as Adobe Suite is used in all sectors. And that's really the beauty of our technology is that it's industry agnostic. You can use the same tool for any application, whether that's for film, adult film, fan engagements, education, whatever.
And so if I'm reading this right, the H&M experience, that was in 2017 that you deployed that?
Yeah. So we deployed, we went to market mid-2017. That was our first major project.
And so what has changed or evolved since that project?
So that project was really a validation project for our tech. Since then, we've moved on to the real-time capture. We did a project for Fashion Week in London in February of this year and beamed the fashion show to Seattle, which was a fantastic test piece for us. Beaming humans in augmented reality with less than 300 milliseconds delay is a fantastic achievement and really kind of unlocks our tech for all sorts of new use cases. On top of that, we've refined the product further. So the beauty of using simple video and overlaying a data mesh is that you can continue to improve the data mesh and the overall experience improves over time. Even content which was captured in the past improves. So that's really cool.
So there was a fashion show in London that you took a video of and then put holograms of humans on a runway in Seattle. Is that how I understand that?
Yeah, so we captured a fashion show in London in Feb, and within basically real time, so 300 milliseconds, we were able to have users in Seattle see these models not on a runway, but on the streets of Seattle.
Are you going to tell us at the end of this interview that we're actually speaking to a hologram of you right now?
That would be good because I could have a nap, but no, I'm physically here. It's been a really big week, and I wish that our technology could replicate my role. So far, that hasn't happened.
So in 2012, there was the Tupac hologram at Coachella, and I remember reading all kinds of pieces at the time that was like, this is going to be crazy because now musicians can tour in cities all over the world at the same time. It speculated on all the different use cases, and then just nothing seemed to happen. What happened? So
Tupac was a really exciting medium. So what they did is they created something which was a stage hologram. It's an age-old technique called Pepper's Ghost, where you beam a human being onto a film, a translucent film, and it looks like he's walking around on the stage. And that tech was fantastic and still is fantastic for large crowd experiences, but you're limited to expensive hardware for the experience and you're limited to one location of viewing. Strangely enough, we've been reached out to by many of the companies that are currently creating those stage holograms. And they're super interested in our tech as a complementary way of viewing those experiences. So on the one side, you have that big crowd experience in a venue, but on the other side, you can reach everyone with a smartphone outside that venue at the same time. And we're currently working with 2 major record labels on doing similar experiences.
How does HoloMe make money granularly?
So we have a very simple pricing structure. We charge per asset created and per minute of content. So it really allows the mass deployment of our tech. It's very affordable. I don't like to say cheap. It's affordable in comparison to any other sort of human capture. And that really allows you to create as many experiences as you like in a way that you can reach your audience properly. So our tech is, the base price is in the hundreds rather than in the thousands in terms of assets. So yeah, we're a content creator in the same way that Adobe works in you being able to just self-serve, create your assets, and on the other side, you have this finished experience. We do the same thing.
You mentioned that your model is per asset created, and these e-commerce companies, they have all of these assets that they're creating. So how many assets would like a retailer be creating?
So the world's larger online retailers have anywhere from 100,000 assets a year up to 1.5 million plus. So yeah, they're definitely the biggest creators of human assets if we're talking about assets themselves. So yeah, they're bigger than film, they're bigger than sports. They're extremely efficient in creating these assets of humans, which means that we have to be equally as efficient.
So Adobe is a very off-the-shelf, you install it, you pay for the cloud access. How would I, as a user, if I wanted to use HoloMe, how would I access it?
If you wanted to use HoloMe as a user, firstly, you'd wait about 6 weeks until we launch the enterprise platform. And then after that's happened, and I'm super excited that I can have a nap, then you could just subscribe to our platform. It's a simple subscription fee. You have the ability to create assets on a SaaS model and deploy them either to your own app, or you can create a white labeled app and deploy it as a one-off experience.
Is there any prerequisite hardware or software that I need to be able to actually do that?
So you don't need anything apart from a video camera. And that's truly what makes our technology so interesting, is that the barrier to content creation is so low that anyone can create experiences. And that's something that I think needs to happen overall in the AR and VR market, is that content needs to be accessible. You need to be able to create content as easily and as quickly as capturing a snap on your phone or filming something.
You mentioned you had the commercial route and you also had this real-time streaming model, this two-pronged approach. Is the pricing the same for both of those? Is that just 2 different applications of it?
So the real-time streaming has kind of an intrinsic value in the communications market. We're working with a major B2B communications provider on integrating our technology into their services. So if you would have like a teleconferencing service like a Skype or a WebEx, instead of video, the next step is having that human in your room. And that's really exciting for our tech.
Have you seen that Facebook video that was passed around recently of them making real-time avatars of people who are wearing the Oculus?
Yeah, I've seen that. And I think that's a good step in the right direction for Facebook.
What does that mean for you?
That's fine. I mean, if Facebook wants to do that, that's great. I mean, I think in terms of teleconferencing, not only do you need to see their face, but you also need to see their body language. And our tech allows you to see the body language. The first step, for example, what Facebook has done is, being able to see the facial expressions is really important. And that's where communication is going. You've got to be able to see facial expressions. You've got to see photorealisticness. You've got to be able to believe that human being is real. Because if you don't, if you're using an avatar, if you're using a computer-generated 3D model, you're not going to want to talk to that human being for more than one experience.
Is this tech patented, patentable, or does it matter?
It's both, which is great. So yeah, we do have patents on the technology. It's a really interesting new way to capture humans. I wouldn't say it's a simple solution. It's a easy solution for people to use using a really kind of interesting route. to content capture, and that is patentable. Yeah.
When you're talking to investors, do they care that it's patented?
It depends where the investor is from. US investors tend to care a bit more than European investors. I think European investors seem to be a bit disenfranchised with software patents presently, but it does matter. I mean, if you can prove a patent, then that's that extra notch on the credibility belt, which is super important.
I would actually love to keep down this thread. Since you're calling us from New York right now, you live in London, you've spoken with investors on both continents. What are the differences in the way investors approach conversations with you?
The differences in terms of geographies?
Yeah. So are there any market differences between the way that investors in London or Europe speak to you than American investors?
So the major differences that I've seen is I think London investors will spend longer on the due diligence of a company. So they'll spend longer kind of investigating what's behind the proposition. Whereas I think US investors tend to look a bit quicker and fire through a bunch of companies at once. However, in terms of technology, so deep technologies like what we're doing, there's definitely more knowledge of the industry in the US. Whether that makes it easier or harder to be invested remains to be debated.
How big could this thing be? It seems like it's an off-the-shelf solution. Anyone can come in and start creating assets and paying for that. But it seems like there's got to be both some level of awareness that this tool exists and some technical savvy to be able to use it. So how big could this be after it's deployed?
This tech could be really big. I just got back from LA looking at different markets in the US to see what the appetite is for our technology. And the overall receptiveness that we had, the positive receptiveness is fantastic. What enterprises are seeing is that they've been really interested in augmented reality for a long time, but they haven't seen the right way to deploy. They haven't seen, the right method, the right technology. And, we've had fantastic discussions about the tech. And anywhere where a human is being filmed, our technology allows those content creators to deploy into AR. Even use cases that, we'd never dreamed of. Like I'd never dreamed of deploying our technology into a sign language application for TV. So it really remains to be seen, where this technology will be applied. And the purpose of our role is to deploy the tool, and creatives in whatever industry can use our tool to create their own experiences. And that's a fantastic thing to have.
What are the next 2 hires you have to make to really grow this thing?
So at the moment, we're relatively fortunate that we've just been able to hire almost double our team. So we've gone from 5 to 10. The next hires are on the technology side in order to keep up with the deployment of our tech.
Is data storage a major cost driver for you, or is that so cheap now that it's negligible?
For us, it's great because we work with large enterprises. So the majority of large corps that use our tech, they have their own content management systems with their own storage. So we just plug into that. It's a good solution for us not to worry about the data storage for these guys. For smaller applications, we do the data storage, but it's negligible.
I'm still wondering, if I'm an investor and I'm saying, okay, I buy into the black box and I think that this works and I see that there's applications in enterprise, I still got to know, how many customers do you have to sell and what does that mean for me as an investor? So, how big is the market itself?
It's difficult to gauge because the use cases themselves are kind of popping out of the woodwork. If you're looking at e-commerce in AR as kind of a basis, in the next 3 to 4 years, there's 230 billion US going through e-commerce in AR. That's something that not only as an investor becomes exciting if the company has the ability to deploy into that market, but also for clients in general. They're looking for that solution. If there's 230 billion going into AR commerce, what's our plan to deploy into that market?
How's that breakdown of your teamwork? You said there were 10 people. Are they mostly technology and then you're handling all the business development and that's why you need a nap? Or is it broken down a different way?
So we're about 50-50. So we have about half developers and technical related people, and the other half is business development, commercial side. So I think the important thing to remember is when you're a tech company is not just to drive the tech forward, but also to drive a stable business and ensure you're checking the boxes and building strong foundations around the business. So yeah, we're we're relatively well focused also on the commercial development side, as opposed to just the tech.
What do the first 6 weeks after launch look like? Like, what's your go-to-market strategy?
First 6 weeks after launch is chaos, absolute chaos, as with most tech startups. We have a bunch of stealth projects which are launching over the next 4 to 6 weeks, which will really prep the market for us in places like in sports for fan engagement, in broadcasting, in the film industry as well, in education, even for one of the world's biggest charities. So we're planning to have a lot of exposure over the next 4 to 6 weeks, which will prepare the market for the launch of our tech. So yeah, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of kind of hiccups along the way, but we're hoping for a relatively smooth launch.
Talk to me about what you know about Magic Leap, which has received just like astronomical amounts of investment, and their approach versus your approach.
So Magic Leap is a phenomenal company. Ronnie Abovitz has done extremely well. And I think what they did very well from the beginning was sell the vision, sell the story. The future is coming and it's going to look like this, and we're creating it. And that's what Magic Leap has done extremely well in the form of being able to generate that hype. And that hype has obviously led to a phenomenal amount of investment. I think what they're doing is great. I think their current headset is also relatively good. But I do know that the technology which is in their labs at the moment is years ahead. So I'm really excited to know and to see what they're going to bring out next.
Does your technology dovetail with their technology because they have the headset and they're looking at things in physical space around them? Does that mean good things for HoloMe, or is that scary?
It's absolutely fantastic for us. So any form of being able to view AR experiences helps us deploy to market. So what Magic Leap is doing is phenomenal for us. I'm praying for the time when a consumer headset gets adopted at a mass scale, because that means that our tech really shines.
In a world of AR, human models, and deep fake technology, should I be scared?
Definitely. You should be terrified. I'm also terrified. It's not our tech, so our tech replicates the real world. So we can't do a whole lot of magic. But yeah, there's definitely some super scary things out there. It's becoming harder and harder to see the right thing, but not only seeing, it's being harder and harder to hear the right thing. So there's Adobe's technology, you can change voice, and all of that multiplied into one fantastic package, opens up a whole bag of problems.
We're just living in a season of Black Mirror.
Essentially, yeah. I'm helping create that, but hopefully for good.
Eric, we should be worried that people will artificially create episodes of our podcast faking our voices.
That's what we should worry about, Jay? That's the one thing.
I'm really interested to see, Apple's phone has this facial recognition technology that unlocks your phone. Now it's going to help you pay for things. And we can create such good human replicas that you can create a fake model of somebody's head and unlock their phones. Like, that's happening. I'm not convinced that that's the safer technology.
I don't know where this is going.
We may see a resurgence of people kind of jumping out and going back to writing checks.
Yeah, and this has been fun. Is there anything that we haven't asked in terms of augmented reality that you get asked a lot or that we should be asking?
I think a question behind, what's the difference between, viewing humans in AR and just your old school video is maybe a good question.
Hey, Jan, what's the difference between view? No, seriously, what is the answer to that question?
So basically, when we had still images, so photographs, it was the new wow experience. It was the step up, the evolution in communication. And then when we started seeing videos online, which were replacing images, so for example, in news stories, you'd have a video instead of an image of a disaster. It was really the next evolution, and it brought you that bit closer to the experience. However, those two techs have been around for some time, and the next evolution really is to have that experience happen in your own space. And that's what our tech allows. That's what augmented reality allows. It's more emotive. It's more immersive. You can see that human as if they're communicating to you directly in your own room. And that's really what AR technology unlocks.
This has been awesome, Jan. If you could tell us where listeners should go if they want to learn about you or HoloMe after the show, where would that be?
Jump onto our website or just Google us. There's new news about us coming out every week. new experiences, even something next week which will blow people's minds.
And what are the dates that people should know of, since this won't be released for another few weeks anyway?
So our platform will be released to the public in the beginning of May. So if anyone wants to try our platform, contact us before then. We can give you an early release of the tech if you like. But really, May is going to be a big month for us. So I'm super excited about that.
All right, Eric, we just spoke with Jan Amstutz of HoloMe Technologies. It's like we're living in the future here.
It's like when I was a little kid and R2-D2 was on the screen and there was, what do you call them? Hologram? Is that what it's actually called? A hologram. And I was like, man, that's so futuristic. Now we're there. Here we are.
We're there. I'll be honest, I was a little dubious coming into the interview.
You're dubious?
I was like, dubious. Little.
What does that word mean? That's a big word.
Well, now I'm going to Google the actual definition to make sure I'm not using the wrong word. But the gist of it is that I was a little, not necessarily critical. It's like the precursor to critical, like skeptical. Hesitating or doubting is dubious. I did it right. I was a little skeptical coming into the interview because it is such future tech. And although we didn't get a ton of numbers in this interview, Jan really seemed to know what he was talking about. So what were your hot takes?
Russian developers is a whole new ballgame for us. That's my hottest take. A team of my Russian developers who look at the way something is being done and say, nah, we can do that better. What an interesting interview part 2 that would be, is just to have them on and just get to know like what's in their heads, because that is, how does this even happen? I don't know. Like, this is just crazy to me. This is crazy that like, this is so different and out of our realm that I can't even really process what a group of Russian like technical talent looks like that just happens to find this guy.
It's probably not that crazy, but I did start to get a vibe. We've listened to several
shoot me down like that? You don't think it's that crazy?
Why is that crazy? They're engineers. They're engineers that happen to live in Russia.
I get that, but it's like, why Jan? He wasn't doing holographs before. Like, go find, like, I don't know. That whole pairing just, it seems like we missed something there, and I wanted a better story. Sorry.
To his point, when you start announcing that you have money to deploy, I think a lot of people find you.
So how did he pick that? Maybe we should have asked that question. How did he decide this is where I'm going with my money?
Well, it sounded like they found him. He talked with them. They showed him some tech. They went to an early AR conference. They saw some stuff that they said that is not even nearly as good as what we could do. So he said, show me, and they showed him.
Fine, Jay. It's not crazy. You're right.
It did make me feel a little bit like I was inside of that interview of Josh Wolf where he was talking about being inside the NVIDIA office and seeing people at the edges of computer graphics and rendering. This seems like that type of conversation or that type of world where you're right at the edge of this technology and you're with people who understand it better than anybody else, and they're building on it, and you're seeing what's possible. You're hitting technical hurdles. What impressed me most about Jan was the point at which he said, I realized that we would have to reverse engineer the business case to figure out what is the method of consumption for an actual customer for this technology, and not just try to do the future tech that we think will exist.
I agree with that on Jan. What I really like about the product comes out of that, which is I can do it with my smartphone. I can do it with any camera. I don't need this essentially 3D camera methodology to kind of find and scan me. I can utilize 2D, which is so simple, yet so complex at the same time.
Yeah, we probably don't even have any idea how complex that is. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, it seems simple conceptually, but I bet technologically, to get down from, he said earlier that 3D capture was like 1 gigabyte of data per minute. Crazy amounts of data. And so this method that he talks about of using video and overlaying a data mesh on top of it, I don't know how that works, but it sounds to me like that's the core innovation here that he has patented that as an investor, I would be most interested in.
It almost reminds me of like 3D movies where you go into the movie and like if I just looked at the screen, it looks 2D. But if I put on these special glasses where those are the data mesh effectively, you pop out as 3D. And I know it's not the same thing, or I'm guessing it's not the same thing, but that kind of innovation is taking what we have, taking what is the current system and saying, what's the result we want and how do we get between those two quicker versus saying, hey, here's the end result. What's the best way to have that? And I think that's where everyone's going right now, which is this 3D scanning, this, okay, we can make everything perfect. This is like, how do we go from here to here as quickly as possible in a way that is 90% as good?
I wonder how much competition, and the idea of competition didn't come up a ton in the interview, and I didn't find much in my research. Granted, I did some pretty cursory research. I wonder how much competition is happening in this space, because this seems like the type of technology where the costs are coming down, the cost of storing data is coming down. We can store all kinds of data, even if we are limiting the amount of data that we're capturing in this method. Magic Leap, super capitalized company, does not seem like a competitor in Jan's eyes. It seems like Magic Leap is developing hardware that he thinks will be a benefit for people to have for his technology. So they might be in a really nice sweet spot here. You know, if I'm looking at this as an investment opportunity, I'm looking at the technology, I'm looking at the competition, seeing who else is playing in the space. But if he had a hold in H&M in 2017, and he says that retail is kind of their beachhead where they go, these people have hundreds, thousands of assets, and they're charging hundreds of dollars per asset created with HoloMe. Those sound like those could be some pretty big numbers, but it also sounds almost too good to be true. You know, if I'm H&M and I have all of these SKUs and I'm creating a digital version of them with HoloMe and I'm paying hundreds of dollars per asset, that seems wildly expensive at some level of scale.
My biggest question here is, what's the incremental benefit for the retailer? Why is a consumer more likely to buy if it is a picture of a person wearing something versus someone in augmented reality in 3D wearing something? Where is that kind of threshold? And I guess the best place to look would be, okay, if someone posts a picture of a top on a retail site and they post a picture of a top on a person on a resale site, what's the incremental likelihood to buy of just changing that picture? And that's how you can kind of at least gauge, okay, does making this more realistic make the consumer more likely to buy? And then you can justify that valuation I think you're talking about. But right now, I don't know, sitting here today, if I was on any website and I saw, okay, I really like this jacket, let me see what it looks like, and I saw it on a model, or I saw it on the 3D version of a model, would that really change how I think about it? I don't know.
You're probably not the target customer of those companies, though.
You don't think I shop at H&M regularly?
Well, just generally, you're not really the core retail customer.
Yeah, that was more of a facetious question. I want to pivot to a different topic real quick, though. There's this idea in startup land and tech that your product needs to be solving a problem, or it needs to be like stoking a desire. Does HoloMe do either of those? I don't know if I have an answer to that.
I think the bet is that it will stoke a desire. That being said, it's entirely possible that given that AR is still so novel and young, people are interested in buying it, trying it, to see what it will do, but it's not yet proven that it will impact buying behavior just because it's so new. So I think that will be Jan's challenge in the coming years, is taking the attention that he's getting from these different enterprises for their different use cases, employing the technology, and then showing a measured result that this did in fact justify the investment and it stoked some desire, whether it's stoking the desire to buy the clothes because you see it on a model that has similar proportions to you and you think it's going to hang on you correctly, whether it's the idea that having a hologram in front of you is a way to access something that you can't go do in person. There are a lot of use cases that theoretically I think could work for holograms, but you know, there's also a lot of use cases that theoretically we thought could work for a lot of things that didn't. Google Glass came out in 2012, 2013. We thought this is going to be huge, and it just didn't quite hit product market fit when it first came out. Could be reinvented, could find new use cases for it, but I think the challenge here is going to be, what can we prove in terms of user behavior being impacted by holograms to move the needle on purchase? That being said, over time, as the technology keeps getting cheaper, it probably becomes an easier investment to make, and even if it has an incremental benefit, it's probably going to be worth doing.
Whether that is the ultimate challenge or not, I think one of the challenges is going to be getting this into a place where it's easy to access. Like, I don't want the friction of having to, like, I want it to be in line with my current experiences, if that makes sense. I want to go to H&M, and when I click this top, it's easy for me to have this AR visual. I want to go on Instagram, and if, like, my favorite influencer is posting a live story of them in AR, I don't want to have to go download another app to go see them in AR. Like, I want it to be in line. When I watch a YouTube video, like, I want that to be inline AR, right? So that to me is a bigger challenge than enterprise measurement justification or enterprise deliverables. To me, it's, as a consumer, how is this the least friction to check out or use or see?
So Eric, putting your investor hat on, what interests you about HoloMe? What potential shadows do you have? You mentioned that if it's not inline, it's going to be hard to consume and might have a lot of friction. Do you have any other shadows or anything else that's particularly interesting to you about this opportunity?
I don't know that I feel one way or the other about this right now. And I think given a little bit more time to evaluate the company and their launch and kind of how this goes forward and the live segment, I'm not sure I'm 100% sold on or 100% against the monetization model. I think that it makes sense as a starting point, but I don't know that it's going to be where HoloMe ends up in terms of monetization. And maybe I'm wrong there, but it's just not clear to me.
I buy into the model. I'm curious on the price point. We didn't get a final price point. You said it's in the hundreds, not in the thousands. But, you know, the tipping point for Facebook was when they made their ads self-serve. Snapchat took forever to get there. They're just now getting there. And that's kind of where they're going to pick up much more revenue, even post-IPO. But having self-service, being a SaaS model, I think makes sense for this if people generally are creating assets. If the creation of the assets is what the technology is ultimately used for, then it makes sense to be a cloud subscription model in my mind. But I don't know what the price point is or where that investment makes sense and for whom. You know, like it could make sense for a retailer that has thousands of SKUs, but if somebody else wants to create an avatar, maybe that price point doesn't make sense. And so how do you segment those two customers and leverage them both? I think a good mark on Jan as a founder is how long he's been working on this and self-funding this. You know, we haven't really talked about his background, which I think is a fantastic story of being Swiss, but growing up in Australia and then moving into commodities trading and then realizing there's more life to be lived here. I'm going to do things my own way. And then finding these guys and investing in these guys and self-funding this experiment for years. I think Jan as a founder is somebody that I would want to bet on, just given how much personal skin he's had in the game and for what period of time.
I completely agree. I kind of want to go into a little tangent on that. We've done almost 60 interviews now, something like 45 or so with founders. And everyone kind of has their own mix of how much they care about founder, how much they care about market, how much they care about the business, etc. Moat is another one people care about. What's your personal mix as we sit here today? I know it can keep on evolving, but like, how much stake do you put on the founder versus the business versus the prospects versus the opportunity versus whatever?
Well, depending on how big my returns need to be is going to dictate how much I care about market size. I think, you know, if I'm a Drive Capital or any other fund that's hundreds of millions of dollars and I need that scale of a return, worrying first about market size seems to be kind of table stakes. If I'm an angel and I don't need a multi-billion dollar market for this thing to get a return on my investment, I'm looking at founder market fit. I'm looking at a founder that's rooted in the thing that he's working to solve. And I think a huge part of that is because I want that person to be committed and like really bought into the problem. But I think a bigger part of that is just intricate knowledge and unfair advantages that come from having relationships in the space already.
Awesome. So if you put your investor hat on then, and you're looking 6 to 18 months in the future, what do you want to see out of HoloMe?
I'm looking to see, you know, he said they had submitted a patent on the technology. Has that been approved? What is the extent of that patent? Because that could be really great or it could mean nothing, depending on what's actually patented. I want to know more about the letters of intent or signed customers that are working with HoloMe, both from a standpoint of which industries and to what degree, like what are they interested in? Because, I mean, you can tell in this deal memo, we're super hesitant because this is pretty far outside of our wheelhouse. We don't know much about the space. The technology is pretty advanced. It's hard for us to wrap our head around the model, the customers, what's actually going into place, and what the long-term viability of it is. So I'm going to look at that as, or through the proxy of the customers who are interested in the technology and understanding why they're interested in the technology and then extrapolating that out.
Yeah, I would say I'm only hesitant because I'm ignorant. I think if I knew more about AR and VR, and maybe it would have been a good idea to have an insight guest on, because I think when we have those on, we usually have a bit more depth of understanding to a problem. But looking 6 to 18 months, I think I'm going to piggyback on yours, but I'm going to dive a little deeper in that we'll be looking 6 months post-launch, effectively, from the day this episode releases, to 18 months post-launch. And I'm not so interested in the first customers that launch, but kind of that second wave that comes after the launch. Like, they're going to have their target customers that they launch with, their launch partners, whoever those are. And what comes after that, right? That's going to tell me more than I think the first partners or customers or whatever you want to call them.
All right, guys, would love to hear your thoughts. As always, you can tweet at us at UpsideFM or email us hello@upside.fm. Otherwise, we'll talk to you next week.
That's all for this week. Thanks for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's guest, so shoot us an email at hello@upside.fm or find us on Twitter at UpsideFM. We'll be back here next week at the same time talking to another founder in our quest to find upside outside of Silicon Valley. If you or someone you know would make a good guest for our show, please email us or find us on Twitter and let us know. And if you love our show, please leave us a review on iTunes. That goes a long way in helping us spread the word and continue to help bring high-quality guests to the show. Eric and I decided there were a couple things we wanted to share with you at the end of the podcast, and so here we go. Eric Hornung and Jay Klaus are the founding parties of the Upside podcast. At the time of this recording, we do not own equity or other financial interest in the companies which appear on this show. All opinions expressed by podcast participants are solely their own opinion and do not reflect the opinions of Duff & Phelps LLC and its affiliates, Unreal Collective LLC and its affiliates, or any entity which employ us. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. We have not considered your specific financial situation nor provided any investment advice on this show. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Never mind, bro, that can't be matched. I'm lighting it on fire, used to run victory laps, and still I'm not even tired. It's all about the timing, yeah, that's what they say. Well, I'ma keep on